Okay. Welcome, 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 everyone. I'm John M. Flemings, and I'm located at the FAS consulate in Guangzhou. But I'm actually representing today all of the offices in China. We have a total of 5 offices, four for agricultural trade and one office of agricultural affairs. So that is, we'll be covering a little bit about what each of them does and what we do as a whole here in China. Can everyone hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you want me to give the presentation? Do you want to go ahead and let Jennifer introduce herself, Celia?
Oh, we can have Jennifer do a quick introduction and then we
Okay.
can get started with the presentation.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Clever. I'm the director of the Agricultural Trade Office at the U.S. Consulate in Hong Kong, and we cover Hong Kong and Macau. Looking forward to the discussion and the presentations.
Great, thank you. And just for everyone that is on this webinar, feel free to put any questions. I will be monitoring the chat. Feel free also to unmute to ask questions, of the speakers. Also, feel free to have your cameras on. It's always very inviting for them to see and very helpful for the speakers to see you. So if you'd like to have your cameras on, it does help them out during the presentation process. So other than that, if you have questions, I will go ahead and also put my cell phone number in the chat. So if you have any technical problems or if you have any problems logging back in, if you get knocked out, feel free to text or call me on my cell phone. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over.
Thank you. And just so you guys know, sometimes technical communication between the United States and China can be a little bit wonky. So both Jennifer and I are kind of on standby and very reliant on Celia today. So Celia will actually be turning my slides for me just to make sure we don't lose connection. All right, perfect. So I'm the director of the Agricultural Trade Office. We can go ahead and go to the second slide. So I thought we'd start off with a bit of an overview about the Foreign Agricultural Service as a whole. So this stands for both myself and Jennifer. Overall, there's about 1,400 employees, including civil servants in Washington. And then abroad, we have foreign service officers and locally employed staff. We actually have a couple here on the line joining us today um, that are covering 180 countries and 100 offices abroad. And just so you know, our slogan is FAS serves as the eyes, ears, voice, and hands of U.S. agriculture around the world. So we try to represent you at every opportunity, and we definitely represent the Secretary of Agriculture. Next slide. And so, how do we do that? So, we do that through a myriad of opportunities. One, trade policy. So, we work with other US government agencies such as USTR, commerce, and we expand and maintain access to foreign markets by removing trade barriers and enforcing US rights under existing trade agreements. So that's a large part of our focus abroad. We also represent international organizations and we establish international standards and rules. So that's a large part of what we do. But also, we do market development and export assistance. For example, US nonprofit trade associations, which we refer to as cooperators, and as well as state and agricultural trade offices. We tend to work collaboratively through trade shows, events, ag promotions, and we work to build markets and stay engaged with the buyers around the world. We do a lot of data and analysis, lots of research. So we tend to work abroad. I do spend a lot of time out in the field trying to make sure I understand what's impacting trade so I can report that back to you. Make sure that we have an understanding of kind of the other players, the competition. So we share a lot of that. And of course, lastly, of course, food security is a big part of what we do. FAS leads USDA's efforts to help developing countries improve their ag systems and build their trade capacity. Next slide. I'm sure you guys already know China is still our #1 market. There's always something going on, but there were $36.4 billion in trade last year, and we're actually expecting that number to continue to rise. Next slide. And when you look at that makeup, and the some of the higher traded products. Soybeans account for nearly one half of U.S. agricultural exports to China. Corn exports, cotton exports are valued for the second highest level at 2.7 billion. Beef and beef product export value is recorded at 2.1 billion last year. So the trade is phenomenal, and not to mention some key products that we'll touch on a little bit later. Some niche products such as tree nuts and dried fruit. There's a lot of opportunities in the Chinese market. Next slide. The Chinese export market is large and it's extremely complex and it is very competitive. Competition is fierce right now, and China loves to encourage competition. So as you'll see here, the United States is one of the key players, but at Hong Kong is not just a market. Hong Kong is a competitor. A lot of trade comes in through Hong Kong as well, so that's the funnel through point. Then you've got Japan, South Korea, Vietnam. So a lot of the Asian countries really work to service this market. When you look at the size of the market and the needs here, the competition is not surprising because they need a lot of imports when you can just imagine the number of people that they're feeding. Next slide. So our top U.S. agricultural exports, just another way to look at it. We've got the corn, the sorghum. Sorghum remains big, especially here in the South. I spend a lot of time working with sorghum buyers. Pork and pork products, beef and beef products, cotton, tree nuts, poultry meat. And we'll be sure to share this slide in case you have any questions, and feel free to reach back out if you have questions about any of these slides. Next. So as we mentioned before, just to give you a sense of kind of how it's covered. So I covered down here the yellow part, ATO Guangzhou, and right across the way is Hong Kong, even though you can't see it on this map. So Jennifer and I are very closely related, and a lot of product tends to flow through in the Greater Bay Area. Then there's ATO Shanghai, so you'll have lots of trade shows there. Shenyang is up here at the top. And then you'll also have the ATO Beijing covers Beijing as well as some of those other regions such as Chengdu, since our office in Chengdu is no longer open. Next slide. And when you think about how we assist U.S. Exporters, so we do it through the cooperators, but we do it through the in-country promotions. We tend to support a lot of buyers' missions, especially now that COVID is gone. We strongly encourage people to move around. Of course, always paying close attention to travel advisories, trade show organizations, seminars and workshops, outreach to emerging cities, and reporting. The GAIN reporting system is expansive. So we tend to report a lot, and we encourage you to read those reports because we send back a lot of tidbits about challenges, opportunities, and what's going on in the market. I think our reporting system is very well read. Next. When we think about how we divide things up, we do it through product sectors. So the HRI sector, the hotel, restaurants, industrial. So we tend to spend a lot of time with workshops, chefs. We tend to look at the retail sector, spending with the supermarket promotions, convenience stores, making sure the products are available. Baking promotions, encouraging the use of U.S. ingredients in baked products. We tend to go to baking shows and working with the chefs there. And not to mention online. Online is huge here in China. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But the online situation and buying online e-commerce has boomed since, particularly during COVID. Next slide. Retail sales in general right now here in China have rebounded. Since the pandemic, there's strong purchases. And you definitely hear a lot in the news about there being a slump. There's definitely, it has not returned to the level and the consistency that we had before COVID. But it's definitely consistent enough to go after. So there's a lot of work being done on the retail side. Whenever I'm out and about, I definitely see what's considered key opinion leaders working in the industry selling products. So a lot of products are sold online. And also due to the pandemic, many retailers realize the importance of supply stability. One thing that we get asked about a lot is they want to be able to buy a product consistently. They want to be able to go to the same supplier. They want to be able to have that relationship. So the relationship building is very important to where we are right now, and building trade and building trust between the two countries. China is also a huge consumption market for nuts, such as almonds and pistachios. So the US almonds and pistachios are well sought after, but there's a lot of competition. But the nuts are like one of our top products. Big retailers did see drop, and the small stores did see some progress. Um, during 2022. So that's something to take note of. So is more the convenience stores, and we have some smaller stores that have really been able to expand through COVID. Despite the situation, people are looking for convenience. Convenience is a huge part of what mainland China often seeks. Next slide. This was just a few shots across China. All of our different offices work with chefs. So, for example, there's a couple of bakery competitions that we had done. One is in Shenyang, one of these was in Shanghai, one is in Guangzhou, and then there was a surf and turf major event that was done in Beijing. So we really worked to educate the chefs around the country on using U.S. ingredients, why to use U.S. ingredients, the stability of the product, and the availability and the high quality. Next. The top retailers right now are like Sunning, and it says Walmart. I just want to flag that Walmart includes Sam's, Easy Home, Yongwei. So this is a snapshot of all of China, right? Not just Beijing, but there's other smaller markets here. For example, in Guangzhou, like Corner Deli, that are booming. So some places, some of the markets aren't all over China. They might be just in Shanghai or just in Guangzhou. And that's the importance of working directly with the particular office where you're wanting to expand. They can share with you some details and get you connected with those particular retailers. Next slide. Fruit imports are I think I was amazed when I first relocated here and really realized how much fresh fruit is consumed. It continues to trend upward. There's a lot of demand and a lot of competition from some of the local like other Asian countries nearby. Durian and things like that are well sought after, but U.S. cherries, U.S. apples, pears are just huge. That they're constantly looking for strong supplies. So something to think about is knowing that there's always some place to sell those products here. But here in the South, there's a place called Jianong Market. It is a major fresh fruit market that sells. Oh, can everyone major fresh fruit market that sells not just U.S. product but all product, and so it's something to always remember is available. Next slide. Okay, hold on one second. My computer is considering whether or not it wants to work with me. All right. Key ports in China are also very important. U.S. fruits tend to come through Shenzhen, which is down here near Guangzhou. There's Guangzhou, Shanghai, Dalian, Zhengzhou. Those are the key ports that come in. There's a lot of interest and demand for new varieties. So, for example, right now the cherries are the normal, regular red cherries are just phenomenal as always, but there's so much interest in like the newer cherries. They even go for a higher price. They're always looking for something new, something different. So the most popular varieties for apples, for example, are like Envy, Queen, Pacific Rose, and just so you know, the cherries are expected to probably double in trade this year. Next slide.
Okay, Joanne, we do have a question in
Yes.
the chat.
Oh,
They're
please.
asking,
Mhm.
is there tariffs on U.S. fresh fruit?
Tariffs. Um, May. I'm trying to see if May is on here.
Yes. Hello.
Yes. Yep, it's here. So which fruits do you want to give a little bit of an update on the tariff situation as it relates to the fresh fruits?
Well, actually, we have, really high tariff imposed on the U.S. fresh fruits. For example, I think for the citrus, after the exclusion, still we have like over 26% tariff. So, comparing with other countries, especially the southern hemisphere countries, actually, U.S. fresh fruits are facing really high challenges of the tariff. Thank you.
That also speaks to why, but they're still well sought after because they're considered premium goods. So that relationship between the United States and China is very important because US products are still considered premium and they tend to compete well even though there is a tariff. And the growth is in spite of the tariff. Yes, that is correct. To this year's growth, for clarification on the cherries, is expected to grow largely because the U.S. crop is so much larger than it was last year, as well as the fact that that dropped the price a bit. So even though you're paying the tariff, the original base price is lower than it was last year. I'm actually trying to look at see if I missed anything. Okay. Thank you. I've actually turned on my chat now so I can see that as well. Next slide. Here was just another snapshot of how we're expecting fruit imports here in China to continue to go up. That is not just U.S. fruit, that's all fruit. So I want to flag that. But that's also us doing a promotion on like Northwest cherries and making sure that we're out there encouraging the purchase of the products. So as they're being sold, that was a promotion put on by the Northwest Cherry Association. Next slide. So I wanted to quickly recap the current major trade shows that are expected, for example. And I've actually got a change in one that I think that you guys will find very interesting. So like, for example, in August, there'll be Hotel X in Chengdu, followed by Seoul in Shenzhen, August the 28th through the 30th. I know one of the participants on the call will be there, so thank you guys for participating. Then next in September, the International Fruit Expo that says Shanghai has now been moved to Guangzhou. So that event is becoming, you'll often see events move around a little bit in China. So that show is actually going to be down here in Guangzhou now, and it's going to be September 1st to the 3rd now. So that one has just shifted slightly. There'll be Food to China also in Guangzhou. There'll be the Asia Fruit Logistica in Hong Kong, which is very important. And I put it in red because I'll be turning that over for Jennifer to talk more about. The Hilton Food and Beverage Experience in Beijing, the Food and Hotel China in Shanghai, Top Wine China in Beijing. This is truly just a snapshot. We actually put out a report a few months ago, probably about 2 months ago, that had all the trade shows that were pending as we're getting things reopened. And that'll be a useful report we can make sure you pull down or we can share. I see a question. For ingredient nut sales in mainland China, which will be the most important show? There are so many shows for for nuts. I believe Sial will be useful. We had Sial in Shanghai, which was a little bit bigger. That was a couple of months ago. Um, let's look at the time frame in which you're planning to travel, and then we can look at what would be the best show to attend. Time frame has a lot to do with it. There are a lot of shows. This snapshot, I mean, like literally, there's over 100 shows per year. All right, so that was the end of my presentation. So I'd love to answer any additional questions.
I'm trying to look up and raise my hand, but I can't see that feature. So this is Dinesh with Select Harvest. Thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thank you.
With the crop, so my question was for the trade show, and
Yes.
I am more my focus is with the Chinese New Year purchase. So even
Hmm.
get reverse, not my time of travel, but when is the most critical time to come to market or come and make those connections to be able to sell for that October or for that August through November period. So the product can make it there for the Chinese New Year.
The real Chinese New Year is so coming in August would be a good time because the real Chinese New Year for us though is like late January, early February. So that's what they consider the Chinese New Year. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So their real focus is around that time frame. So a lot of products sell very well in the run up to the end of January and the beginning of February. So building relationships at any point in time would be important, not just 6 months right before, because you still got to get the product on the water, building that relationship and that trust. I would say a year in advance.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there a negative consumer sentiment towards US imports due to politics, or does a premium a notion outweigh that? In general, the premium notion tends to outweigh the negative sentiment. There's always something in the air, of course, between the United States and China. I cannot lie, that is definitely there. But but there's still a love for U.S. products. They love the uniqueness. It is still considered premium. If anything, the biggest impact is the tariffs more than anything else. The next one, answer to the above question. There's a show for bakery and ingredients in China in the middle of the year. There is more than just one show. So that when you look at that, there's several. Someone mentioned that there's one in China. There's actually like three in southern China. There's a couple in Shanghai. There's a couple in Beijing. So it really does depend. The ones in Shanghai tend to be well sought after right now, but there's a true focus from the industry, from the importers too, that they are really trying to diversify and bring more attention to the ones that are not just the ones in Shanghai. So, for example, the ones in the south, the ones in Chengdu. So, yeah. You mentioned that tree nuts do well, specifically almonds and pistachio. What about walnuts? Yes, walnuts are very popular as well. It's just not as there's a history behind the pistachios, for example. The name is more is like a happy nut. The name in Chinese is a happy nut, and that sells very well. It's been well marketed. So the Chinese consumers love very, very happy things. They like things that are karma, happy, positive. That tends to go a long way. So the fact that the pistachio, the U.S. pistachio, is considered the happy nut is huge, and that tends to help to sell the product. No or little export of walnuts to China. China is the largest walnut producer. No or little. China does produce, but China consumes a lot. I've got the impression that it has more to do with our supplies as to why there's not a lot of exports. If you guys have the product, then they'd be willing to buy it. Next question. Are there any additional questions?
Would you know if there is anything on the tariffs happening, which we can see in the short term?
I cannot speak to a significant shift in the tariff situation as of yet. I continue to cross my fingers, but there's not anything that I can say that would say that the tariffs are going to change anytime in the near future. But I do know that the two countries are working hard at building a stronger relationship, and trying to get over their differences, and that would only help to hopefully um, bring an end to the tariff situation at some point down the road. Is the GAC application open? When you say are you thinking Decree 248 or?
Yes.
Yep. They had a rush to basically have everyone reapply by the 30th, but it doesn't mean that new applications are not being accepted. So new applications can be sought after.
Well, I have applied for it, and I've done the U.S. side of it, but we've also were advised to go ahead and fill out the GAC application. And when we got response back, they're requesting that number from the U.S. Department, but the U.S. Department basically came back and said that there's still negotiations going on. So we're kind of in limbo right now.
What time? What? At what point was that?
This
Can you
is
give me the
only
month time
maybe a
frame?
couple months ago.
A couple months. There has been some movement. I think I would probably encourage us to follow up after the call to
Okay.
see exactly kind of where FDA, there was a huge push to support as far as getting some information. There are continued conversations with FDA as far as kind of how far and how long things will continue, but there has been some movement. So we'll have to follow up on your application specifically.
Okay, because I'm not getting any response right now. I've attempted many times, and all I need is that number from the U.S. Department to issue for the GAC application.
Yep. But I would love to follow up specifically on your application because I do know that they had taken some steps to get existing applicants through the process. So I would want to follow up with you directly.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Definitely. You're welcome. And you'll have my contact information from Celia. So
Okay.
okay. Any additional questions from me before we transition over to Hong Kong? And it looks like my blur function on my camera decided it was going to go rogue. So you probably can't see me at all. So I do apologize for that. All right. So we'll go ahead and move over to Hong Kong.
Okay. Thank you, Janan. We're going to go ahead and go off with Jennifer. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right.
I will
Go ahead and turn it over to you.
go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if it's working. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, everything looks great.
Okay, great. If I could just thank you, John Ann, for that overview, really good of what FAS does. You saved me some time, so I really appreciate it. But the one thing I wanted to add to that is someone asked about tariffs, and I previously served in Beijing between 2014 and 2018. And what I will say is that while, as John Ann mentioned, there's always something in the air, we cannot emphasize enough the importance of building those relationships. Do not wait until the tariffs come down or whatever happens to them. do put some time in building the relationships, because if the tariffs do go down, then that will already have a good foothold. You will have a good foothold in relationships with your traders. So that I would encourage you to continue to establish those relationships regardless. So I have a lot of
agree.
slides.
Fully agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a lot of slides, and I want to be mindful of people's times, but you will have this presentation later from Celia, so you can go through it and you'll have our contact. But I'm trying to.
Okay.
Sorry, did you have a question? All right, I'll keep going. So I'm gonna go through this fairly quickly, just focusing on things that I think you ought to know. And happy to take questions as I go. But I thought it was very important that we would have the distinction between mainland market and Hong Kong, because they are fairly different markets. And what I tend to hear a lot from our exporters, that they tend to be lumped into one. And there's significant differences that if you understand them, when you deal with traders that are specific to Hong Kong, that will set you apart from other exporters. So understanding these nuances, if you don't take anything else from this presentation, is that you have to keep those in mind when you're approaching traders in Hong Kong. And the other thing I will say that you need to remember about this presentation is that Hong Kong is not a volume market, but it is a critical taste setter in the region. And you'll see why in a bit. Like I said, I have a lot of slides, don't be scared, but this gives you a kind of a quick overview of what I want to go through. I want to tell you a little bit about the economy, what the market advantages are, what some of the consumer trends are. We'll touch a little bit on trade, what happened in retail sector during the pandemic and now. Quick introduction to Macau, because we can't forget the other city of Macau. And then some best practices. But again, if you understand the nuances between the mainland market and the Hong Kong market, when you deal with traders, it is going to make a great difference. So talking about the Hong Kong economy, it's less than 8 million people, but we still have one of the highest per capita incomes in the region. And it's important to take into context the history of the city, because that has greatly influenced not only their tastes, but also the way that they conduct business. In terms of the economy, what you saw in the Western world following 2020, that spring that we all want to forget in 2020, that happened in Hong Kong during the first quarter of 2022. So while we saw a bounce back on the economy in 2021, the first quarter of 2022 was quite severe for us. But now you're seeing finally recovery in the economy, and now with the most optimistic outlook for the economy to grow 5.5%. And I will say that a lot of that, one of the key pillars for Hong Kong is tourism. It's not all of it, but it's one of them. Trade in goods is another one, because of the logistics that Hong Kong has, shipping logistics, and also finance. So you can see right away that there's optimism about where the economy is headed. There's also, I think, a real kind of reality check within the leadership here and economic observers that the economy can not only depend on domestic demand, it's going to have to depend on improvement in trade. And that depends largely on our colleagues in the north, our market in the north, that as John Ann mentioned, is also a market for Hong Kong exports. And here you can see, I mentioned tourism was a great deal, a good engine for the Hong Kong market. And we used to host about 50 to 60 million people a year, all that like fine dining. And that number is slowly starting to come up. The reopening of the borders in January really was a game changer. And I think people are ready to get back to business. Market advantages for Hong Kong. This is not like any other market I've ever worked. I've worked in mainland, in Japan, in Europe, Southern Europe. This is like no other market I've seen. The number of products that you see in the supermarket and sources is incredible. So the Hong Kong consumers have absolutely choice when it comes to sourcing their products. Hong Kong imports 95% of what they consume. So diversifying suppliers is something that traders here put a big emphasis following the pandemic, and also following the shipping logistics that we faced, the challenges that we faced towards the tail end of 2021 and early 2022. We mentioned it's a country, one country, two systems. Why is this important to you? Because while Hong Kong is a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China, it does have regulations that are autonomous. And while it's true that a lot of the regulations and other legislation is moving towards mainland practices, when it comes to food imports, as I mentioned, 95% of food imports come into Hong Kong. Regulators have to take a very pragmatic approach to how they regulate imports, food imports into Hong Kong. So we have westernized business practices. Business language is English. With some of the older Hong Kong traders, Cantonese, Mandarin would be definitely the language. But what we're seeing right now is a retirement of the old school traders. There's a lot of retirements going on. So this is shifting. Another reason why you should come to Hong Kong and you should meet with a new generation of traders. Most of them have been educated overseas. And then we have a transparent and very stable import regime. Again, it pays for the regulators to stay pragmatic about how they approach imports. We mentioned the highly efficient logistics system. Despite all the challenges that we had with the pandemic, Hong Kong still retained its ranking as the world's busiest air cargo facility in 2022. We do not have tariffs on most products, just on alcoholic beverages that are 30%, above 30% alcohol content, and we have a very sophisticated distribution network. Hong Kong is very close proximity to other markets in the region, and that's one of the reasons why we think it's a great springboard for medium and small business enterprises to start showing their product, start introducing their product in this market. Also, you have access to the Greater Bay Area where our neighbors, John Ann and colleagues are. So Hong Kong is also a good place to give you access to those markets there as well. And the US has a great reputation as a supplier to Hong Kong. We have success in our trading relationship. There are strong re-export opportunities, as I mentioned. And when you see the US is a product from the US, Hong Kong consumers recognize that as quality, premium product. This slide is one of my favorites because, again, this is not like any other market I've ever worked in. We have a very predictable and consistent import regulations. There are no duties except for liquors, as I mentioned, no import quota. There's no plant registration for US products. And you do have certification requirements for high-risk products only. In the case of raw seafood, I don't think there's anyone exporting seafood, but I'll mention it. While there's no requirements, as an industry practice, it's highly recommended, particularly given the high-risk nature of raw seafood. Labeling, you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to labeling. Stickers are allowed, English labeling is allowed, and there are exceptions for a certain number of units a year. And then while there are no organic regulations per se, the USDA organic logo is accepted. So imagine my shock when I went to the grocery store when I first moved here in 21, and I saw all this USDA organic product in the shelf. It was really exciting. So there's definitely room there to grow. I'm rushing through these guys because I know I want to get to questions, but please feel free to ask. So in terms of, it's a dynamic food culture. There's a high cost of living here. Most of the Hong Kongers are spending most of their income in housing, but the second thing is definitely food. You have very busy, extremely busy and affluent consumers. And then these consumers have traveled overseas. You saw the map and how close other markets are. You can go on a weekend, to Thailand or to wherever you want. So they are used to international cuisines. They are very open to trying different things. and they're looking for that type of exciting product. We have used this actually in our marketing because we showcase US ingredients as versatile and being able to adapt to any type of cuisine. And dining out is very common here. Hong Kongers are known to be big foodies. Social media, it's completely saturated. You will bump into people looking at their phones. I don't know if that's happening in the US, but here you always bump into someone that was not paying attention, looking on their phone. And so we try to make a big effort in some of our trade associations also in engaging consumers through social media. There is also a rising food and beverage e-commerce, not to the extent that you would see in other economies. Having served in Southern Europe, I see a lot of parallels where you saw rise of e-commerce for food and beverage during the pandemic and then kind of leveling off, but it's still pretty significant and expected to grow to 733 million by 2026. That said, when it comes to fruits and vegetables, consumers prefer the brick and mortar outlets. They want to see the product. They want to go and experience, have the shopping experience in person. Traceability and food safety remain of the utmost importance for Hong Kong consumers. What I have to compare it to is my Japanese consumers, like that type of high quality, high food safety. Any little food safety incident gets reported immediately and makes big news. But in that event, US has a very good reputation for food safety. And awareness of health and the importance of health, I think we saw that all over the world. It was definitely coming to Hong Kong, but it got heightened with the pandemic. So folks are now looking for healthier options, plant-based options. There's a big interest in those type of things. But as John Ann mentioned, I see one parallel here. Convenience is still one of the biggest things for the fast-paced lifestyle, particularly in millennials and Generation Z. So they're looking for convenience. They're also looking for convenience in packaging, green packaging, and sustainability. And I think in that sense, we also have a great story to tell on sustainability of US products. So the more you can tell a story about what your product is, how it's produced, how consciously you are producing the product, that gives you a leg up on other suppliers. This may be a little outdated. They're working on a new survey now, but I wanted to show this because, again, we mentioned food, they're big foodies, right? So they're eating out most of the time, takeaway. This is just a snapshot of what they actually purchase. But it seems a little low because of the year, but it does give you a breakdown and also the importance of where fresh vegetables and fresh fruit lie when it comes to consumer choice. Quickly on trade. Hong Kong, again, consumer-ready products is our bread and butter, pun intended. This is where we really make an impact here in Hong Kong. And you see overall global imports on fresh fruit are the most powerful: seafood products, beef products, and you see where US lies. So to me, there's still a lot of growth and potential to be able to satisfy the Hong Kong market. Just going back here, I will say competition is fierce, not only for shelf space, but for a spot at the fancy restaurant dish. When it comes to trade for US exports, you can see the breakdown there, and I won't spend too much time on this because you'll have access to this, but I was very thrilled to see the latest numbers from the first 5 months of this year. We do have consumer-ready products as holding stable, and this is the first time in 2023 that we've been able to hold that, and largely pushed by beef exports, poultry, tree nuts, fresh produce. So that's very exciting to see that trend that we were seeing constantly down, now it's like leveling off. So that's really exciting news for us. We put together these tables for those of you who are interested in vegetables and fruit the fruit one will come in a second, but we have strong competition from China, Japan, and the Netherlands. But you will see that for specific products in the United States has the lead rank as asparagus, lettuce, potatoes, those sorts of products. So we do have a role to play when it comes to particular products. And for this case, I do want to point out that Hong Kong only re-exports about 1% of their vegetables. So re-export is not as big as you'll see in a second for fruit. Here, the top suppliers are Chile, and I think that was particularly cherries. Last year, the last couple of years, Chile has really basically eaten our lunch when it comes to cherries. So we're hoping to see a comeback this year. And Thailand and Peru are also some of the major suppliers. But again, we do have a strong presence in citrus, plums, and other fruits. The US definitely is a high contender. In terms of re-exporting fruits, yes, Hong Kong does re-export a great deal. I believe it's about a little over 70% of what they're re-exporting. Quickly on I'm sorry, I'm flashing through this, guys. But I want to highlight what I believe is important so that you can ask questions. So we do a lot of in-store promotions throughout the year. We do about 8 a year because it's important for us to keep our presence in other suppliers like France, Thailand, Japan are doing a lot of in-store promotions. So we feel at the need that it's very important for us to be present at these stores. And these are some of the major ones. A.S. Watson Group is one of the larger ones, along with DFI Retail Group. And you can get a little bit more information on our retail report. I've also provided a link for you there. It's just recently published. So major retailers dominate the supermarket. There's a wide distribution from basics to specialty stores. And we did see a growth in specialty stores, fruit stalls, meat stores during the pandemic, again, for that convenience factor. But it seems like they do have now a role to play. They do face, grocery stores do face a high operating cost. So do keep that in mind when dealing with these major supermarket stores. For those specialty mom and pop outlets, we would recommend that the U.S. exporter work with an importer or agent. It's much easier to place your product in that sector of the market that way. And actually, food retail in Hong Kong was one of the few bright spots during the pandemic. It held pretty steady sales throughout this time, except for 2023. And we've been wondering what that was, but we finally found out an explanation for this. And I don't know if you've heard of this term, but they're calling it revenge spending. So when the first quarter of the year, I faced a little bit of that myself. When the first, reopen of the borders happened, people just took off. They were traveling, they were dining out because there were no more restrictions to eating at restaurants. So we see a slight slowdown in food retail during the first quarter of 2023, but all observers are indicating that sales are expected to normalize again once people have, gone out and traveled and gotten that out of their system and, back to normal. So what are buyers looking for? What are the trends in the United States? What's hip? Do you have a story about that? Innovation, innovative products, reliability, that is something that John Ann mentioned. They're looking for suppliers that will be reliable. They're looking for suppliers that will be responsive. So even if you don't have an answer, even if you don't have the product, do be responsive. Follow up is extremely important to building your relationships here in Hong Kong. It does help if you do have experience shipping to other countries in the region. That shows a good record, and then clarity in the product that you are presenting. Very quickly on Macau. It's a much smaller market for sure. And in terms of regulations, they do follow more closely what mainland practices are. Most of the product that goes into Macau, gets channeled through Hong Kong. but they do have some regulations I'll point to in a second. And I left you a table that differentiates between Macau and Hong Kong, the main differences. But they do have, again, Portuguese influence, so that influences their tastes and preferences. The economy for Macau, tourism is a pillar in Hong Kong, but tourism is the mecca for Macau, and the economy in Macau suffered greatly with the pandemic. But now with the reopening and the return of tourism, it's expected that the economy will grow double digits at the end of the year. And so far, the latest numbers that we see in terms of tourism, it's come back to about 12 million, close to 12 million people in the first quarter of the year, first half of the year, sorry. And but we used to host in Macau, 29 million. So slowly but surely is recovering. Think of Macau wants to be the next Vegas. They want to expand entertainment platforms, but what that means also is expansion of restaurants and that food experience that tourists are looking for. So that leaves growing opportunities for US premium product. I mentioned the reopening of the border, complete game changer for a city like Macau. I'm leaving this independent regulations from mainland, but there are some differences between Macau and Hong Kong, and we've identified those key ones there in that table for your reference. Best practices, I've mentioned some when dealing with Hong Kong traders, understanding the nuances and the differences between the market, and the fact that you know about these nuances can go a long way in establishing your relationships here. And be prepared to make adaptations, the packaging size, smaller fridge, also convenient. Can I take it on the go while I run to work or run to the next thing? If you need any assistance, you can always contact us. Follow up, follow up, follow up. I cannot emphasize this enough. Even if you don't know the answer, get back to the trader, because you never know when you'll need that relationship again. And then be willing to invest long-term and start with a small volume. Here's some of the shows that are coming up and opportunities in Hong Kong to showcase your product. And I will touch base on Asia Food Logistica. I want to share that we kept running the trade shows during the pandemic. And while we didn't have US exporters presence at the shows, traders took notice of who was there. And we had, the strongest pavilions that we could have. But I think this is the time to return to Hong Kong and reestablish those relationships. Hong Kong does have a choice. They have many suppliers that are courting Hong Kong traders, and they do remember who comes and shows up. So I had a boss a long time ago. I don't know, John Ann, if you remember Steve Schnitzler, but he always said 70% of success is showing up. Well, I definitely think in this case, I think in this case, it does make a difference.
Very true, very true.
Yeah. So very quick for Asia Fruit Logistica, it's a USDA endorsed trade show. We have a big pavilion. It's an annual regional fresh produce. In 2019, we had about 12,000 top buyers come with 800 exhibitors from around the world. This year, we're hosting about 16 US exhibitors. So we're very excited about that. If you have any questions, I believe there's still room for one or two more exhibitors for this show. But even if you want to just come and check out the show and reconnect with folks, it's a good idea. Lastly, I will say if you want to find a little bit more about what's going on in Hong Kong, we do have a couple of videos that we've taken. One is pre-COVID, and then the other one is interviews with chefs and restaurateurs as to what they're seeing following the pandemic. Keep up with market news. As John Ann mentioned, the GAIN Global Agriculture Information Network system is really a good tool and resources for you all. And then also subscribe to our bi-monthly newsletter. The Hong Kong Wonton came up as a ability to connect US exporters to the market when they couldn't travel, but it's been very well accepted. So we'll continue to produce that for you all. So if you want to subscribe, let us know. Here's our contact information, and that's it. Well, thanks.
Okay, did anyone have any questions for Jennifer?
Well, if anything comes to mind, feel free to reach out to us. Again, Hong Kong is a great springboard for your product, kind of, tipping your toes in the water to see how your product will do.
Okay, will your contact information be made available somewhere? Yes, I will go ahead and follow up with those that I do have checked off as checking in today. I do have your email addresses, so I will follow up. It probably will not be until sometime tomorrow. We're gonna work a little bit more on getting the presentations together in the small enough files so we can actually get them out to you. So all that contact information will be within the files and within the email from me. And always feel free to email me also, and I can get you connected directly if you need it prior to receiving the email from me. And I'm going to go ahead and type my email into the chat right now. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll share one last bit of intel from the exporters that actually have returned to the United States. To Hong Kong from the US. What they tell us right after is that we had no idea the potential that was here. So you won't know. We can tell you until we're blue in the face, but you need to come and see it for yourself.
And I have to agree. This is John Ann. I was going to say something very similar. For those that have traveled to mainland as well, they've been quite almost shocked, at that level of growth and the high standards too for some of the buyers. So how much they're willing to pay, how much they are looking for that level of consistency and that trust and that relationship building. It's just a huge part of getting back into the market and moving forward.
Yeah.
And did you want to both share a little bit about, what I think we just discussed a little bit about how you can help them on an individual basis, or if they come into the country, things that you can
sure.
do.
Jennifer, you want to go first? You still have the floor, sweetie.
Sure, they can contact us. We can give them a little bit more specific information as depending on the product that they're looking for. We can we keep importer lists as well that we can share depending on what product you're looking to. And then if you come, if you're planning to come, let us know. If it's not for the show on your own, just let us know and we'll help you set up meeting opportunities.
Definitely. And then in addition to that, we do work really closely. I'm not sure which one of you are part of cooperator groups, but that we do also work closely with the cooperators and build a really strong network to make sure that we can maximize your visit. So as far as putting you in contact, I definitely do opening remarks and facilitate however I can and whatever you have going on.
Okay, any final questions?
We're here to help.
Always.
All right, I don't see any other questions. I just want to say thank you, Jennifer and Janan. Great job. We have some great remarks and I just really appreciate you partnering with us and putting on these presentations. So other than that, thank you all for attending, also taking your time tonight to attend and get this information. I wish you all luck in your exporting goals. Okay.
Absolutely our pleasure. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, good night.